Yo, 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 yo. What's up? What's up? What's up? Give up the rack. My name is MysterE, and welcome to this live stream. And welcome to all of you, my fellow revolutionaries. Here we are, Monday in Australia, the first day of the working week, a, a day of a solemn day in the work week. Or in the long week of the working class. And today we're going to be picking up from where we left off on Friday, which was particularly we were looking at techno feudalism and kind of analyzing what techno feudalism actually is. And we actually had a look at, you know, basically the concept in Yanis Varoufakis's book, Techno Feudalism, What Killed Capitalism. And so, like, there's obvious language there, like Yanis Varoufakis's point, his case in that book, and like outside, obviously, in the public realm when he speaks and all that sort of stuff. He definitely feels like we have transcended capital as the basis of a mode of production. And we're now in what he describes as techno feudalism. And so, if you were here on Friday, you would have been kind of across what we were discussing and how we were defining that. But I will give you a quick kind of crash course in techno feudalism right now. The mode of capitalism is based on, I guess, a couple of things you can think about. It's based on the idea of capital, and capital is value in motion that is self realizing. And what the hell does that mean? Talk about cryptic mystery. What are you going on about? Yeah, value in motion. So it's a form of value. It could be in the form of money, it could be in the form of goods or services. It takes a certain form at a certain point, and its existence and its reason for being is to produce more than itself, than it starts with, and that is always done kind of in a monetary cycle, because money is the way that we exchange in the modern world. We exchange values and exchange goods with one another. In an announcer voice. Get ready to be censored. Get ready to be censored. Yo, 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 yo. It's 4AS and Ollie Atlas in the house. Hello to you, my fellow revolutionaries. I was just giving a bit of a recap on what we were speaking about last Friday with techno feudalism. And yeah, so like kind of broadly, what I was just trying to surmise was like, what is capital? So capital is value in motion, which reproduces itself larger than what it started with. So if you put money as capital at the start and you you use that to kind of buy labor and goods, and you produce something, then you sell that back in the marketplace for more than what you started with. So that's what capital is, in terms of its productive capacity. But capital is also a social relation as well, and a system of social relations. But the core social relation is that between labor and capital. So the profit, so that, like, when you put the money in at the start and you pull out more money at the end, which is profit, profit has its material basis in the social relation between capital and labor, because capital will purchase, goods and labor and, spend things on many costs. But like all of those in an exchange society, all of those costs are equivalent for equivalent. They lay out money as equivalent cost for the price of the goods they're buying. But like labor is a cost for capital, which it doesn't pay the equivalent for. It pays labor less than it's worth, so it pays a wage and expects to get what Marx would describe as surplus labor out of the laborer, labor that is additional to kind of to what it's being bargained for. And so like capitalism runs off that. It runs off this idea of a form of value that increases itself, and a central relationship between the capitalist, who is like, capital personified, and that person employing labor to help produce the surplus value that the entire system feeds off, the entire system. Now, techno feudalism leaves all of that behind. If you speak to someone like Yanis Varoufakis, because this is his contribution to the leftist canon, I guess you would say, is that, yeah, capitalism is gone now because the mode of production doesn't rely on profit anymore. So before, capitalists forever have needed profit and have used profit as a motivation to do what they do. And like Yanis's argument is that, like for the big techno feudalists, so the people, the tech bros, the people that control all of the tech infrastructure, they don't actually need profit anymore to survive, and they don't do what they do to create profit either. They live off government stipends almost. So the government, central banks around the world print money, and like they end up in the hands of like massive corporations anyway. So, your biggest corporate players on the global scene, and like majoritively, or they are consisting of tech bros. I see Curly Luigi is back today. Yes, Curly Luigi is back for IS. So I hope you're not planning on becoming a CEO anytime today. If it's not too soon to use a joke of that nature. I'll have to ask Brian Thompson about that. He'll let me know. So, yeah, profit is gone. MysterE. Me? Never. Yes, never. Good. Unless you're going to go, I don't know, as like some type of double agent or something like that, get into the system, earn their trust, and then bring them down from the inside, which we're all for here. Various tactics to bring about the revolution. So yeah, the system's not based on profit anymore, not for these guys anyway. And like the central relationship between capital and labor is therefore not necessary, because like they don't care about profit. They live off rent now, so they just suck value off other people. They subordinate the capitalist class, who's still there trying to make value in the system. But like they are subordinate to these techno feudalists now, and so this ruling class of techno feudalists, the fact that like profit is not really at the basis of the economy anymore, as a driving force, is means for Yanis to say that techno feudalism is here, and there is no mode of production based on capitalism anymore. And so that's the thesis pretty much. And like there is a new central relationship in terms of value creation, and value creation really comes down to data now. So like I think most of us would know pretty well that like what we consume, what we do on any device, anything that's part of the Internet of Things and connected somehow to digital infrastructure, gets basically collected, and we all get data mined and trawled, and like this data is potentially the new currency, but like at least the new oil, so the new way of creating value in this world, because this world is all about control, like ultimate control, almost totalitarian style control, where your data is collected, or masses of data are collected, to conglomerate people into groups and stuff, so they can be watched and controlled, and more than that, their behavior can be modified. So capitalism relies on like the liberal idea of like people exchanging in a marketplace kind of thing, on a labor market, or literally going to purchase goods and stuff like that. But like that's not necessary under techno feudalism, because like they know your purchasing habits because everything's done online. and digitally, and they know what you're thinking, they know what you're feeling, because like they know what music you're listening to, they're listening to potentially even to what conversations you're having, and so they can modify your behavior. It's not about marketplaces anymore. They will offer you products, and like, you know, tell you what to consume. Basically, like before there was an art of persuasion, and now it's kind of just like, oh, you're hungry, I knew you were hungry before you knew you were hungry, kind of thing. Here, have a look at this, and like I can get it delivered to you straight away. And so like they can control our behavior. Ultimately, there's no agency, there's no liberalism anymore. It's complete, it's feudalism in terms of its control over everything, even the decisions that you make. Very, very bleak stuff we're talking about here, like incredibly bleak stuff. And like, you know, talk about dystopian. I can be an anti-cipher from the Matrix. Yeah, do that. That's what I'm talking about. You can, yeah, become a CEO and like, you know, work for us from the inside for AS. They reap what they sow, and sometimes the grass gets short and dry. That's an interesting analogy. I like that one. But yeah, so this is where we're at. Okay, so this is what Yanis is saying. And today we're going to like look at, I guess, like, yeah, a critical kind of analysis by a particular channel here. I'll show you the channel. The channel is called Go Meta with Ollie Sharp. And so like Ollie Sharp seems to just be a book reviewer, I guess. And like he reviews like concepts and stuff like that. And so like, yeah, he critically analyzes things. And like he's gone after Yanis Varoufakis's baby, which is Techno Feudalism. And so like, let's, you know, have a look-sees. I remember you sharing this guy on the Discord. Yes. So like, let's have a little look-sees and see if this guy's got anything really of value to say. And like, you know, jump in with comments when you feel like it. I'm not sure if you've read Techno Feudalism or if you've heard Yanis talk about it. Like we've done a bit of that last week where we spoke about it. So like you should be kind of across it, I guess. But like, yeah, let's see what Ollie Sharp has to say about this book review. And then like, yeah, we'll interject where we feel necessary. All right. So I guess let's just jump straight into it, shall we? And like I said, leave comments and we will discuss and see how we feel about it, to be honest.
So I've just recently finished reading Yanis Varoufakis' latest book, Techno Feudalism, and it's a great title, but not a great book. Now, look, I get the sentiment that we're all feeling these days of being increasingly enmeshed in a new digital world order that chains us like serfs bonded to a virtual fiefdom from which we have no means to escape. A situation that the rise of AI is just going to make worse. That's why it's such a great title. But Varoufakis is claiming to offer more than just an evocative analogy. He's claiming that this is actually the correct mental framework with which to understand the political economy we live in today, and argues that it is a mistake to continue to see it as primarily being a capitalist economy. Techno-feudalism, I claimed, is qualitatively distinct from capitalism, and thus, as a word, it illuminates crucial aspects of the real world in ways that rentier capitalism or platform capitalism or hypercapitalism cannot. And that's a big claim.
That's a big claim. So what page did he have there? 144, I think it was. Let's have a look and see if I have made the same notation as he. Yeah, there we go. Techno-feudalism, I claimed, is quantitatively distinct from capitalism, and thus, as a word, it illuminates crucial aspects of the real world in ways that rentier capitalism and platform capitalism or hypercapitalism cannot. Interesting. All right. He hasn't taken him out of context. That's what I was looking for, if you're wondering. Like, he really just says that's it. All right.
And I don't find it convincing. But before I get to why, let me first explain his big idea.
Yeah, do it. Let's see if he's onto something here.
The overall framing of Varoufakis' book is that it is written as a letter to his late father, and the book starts with some touching anecdotes of how his father introduced him to the historical progression of our political economy. So let's also take a very brief and vastly simplified look at that history to capture the basic features and terminology of the three key eras that Varoufakis talks about: feudalism, then capitalism, and now Techno Feudalism. Under feudalism, a king grants land ownership rights and obligations to a collection of lords, who could then subdivide their land and pass on similar rights and obligations to vassals. Such a piece of land with its associated contractual rights and obligations was known as a fief, and it gave the vassal rights over all the people and produce generated within the bounds defined by their fief. Serfs were the people whose family was legally bound to the land of particular fiefs. And this is a crucial aspect of how feudalism worked. Serfs were not free people. Over the generations, their family inherited the obligation to work for whomever was the vassal of their fief. And the whole of the mini-society that existed within the context of a given fief was sometimes referred to as a fiefdom. The serfs worked the land and had to give a proportion of their produce and income to the vassal as rent, some of which was in turn passed further up the hierarchy. But some serfs could also sell some of their excess produce and
Yo. How are you going? Katea. Welcome to the chat. I can't remember what server that I put it on. But like, here's the link if you want to watch it for yourself. So we're just looking at a video to try and critique Yanis Varoufakis' idea of techno feudalism. And so this guy called the channel's called Go Meta with Ollie Sharp, and yeah, he's provided, like, I don't know, a critique, and he's not very happy with Yanis Varoufakis, and he's providing a critique of his idea of techno feudalism, but he's going back to basics here and, you know, trying to ground us in what the idea of feudalism is actually about, to, I'm assuming, critique. I was talking to one of the other people in the chat. Oh, okay. But yeah, we're going to go through this one and see if there's any value and points of discussion for us in critically analyzing techno feudalism.
crafted goods in local markets to generate a surplus income. And so there was also a growing market economy within which it was possible for some people to make a profit. However, in the political economy of feudal times, rents and the hierarchical power structures that supported them dominated any such profits. Then came along the capitalists. The capitalists used their accumulated wealth to build factories to produce goods that they could sell in the market for profit. They employed waged labor to operate their factories. This proletariat class of workers were no longer serfs bonded to the land, but were slightly more free in that they could choose who to work for. But especially with the enclosure of common land, the working class were effectively bound to the dynamics of the labor market in order to make a living. Over time, the feudal system collapsed in the sense that there were no longer any bonded serfs. The landowners still owned their land, but now they had to compete for labour to work their farms from the general labour market of free labourers. And of course, capitalism was boosted by the rise of the financial sector, such as banks and the stock market, which enabled capital wealth to be deployed more rapidly across the economy. And crucially for our purposes here, in this capitalist economy,
look, this is not a bad summation of like the transition from like feudalism to capitalism in a historical materialist sense. But like, you know, I think what I would add to this, I don't know, he said, look, it's really brief. But like what I would add to it is that like these gentlemen over here, these landed, the landed gentry, let's call them, the aristocracy of old, in the English sense, okay, so that's where the history of the historical analysis comes in from a Marxist perspective, or from the work of Karl Marx, is that like these landed proprietors and stuff like that, it wasn't just like capitalists came along out of nowhere one day and were kind of just like, oh, we got all this money, let's just make industry or something like that. Like the people that were kind of the feudal lords or the landed aristocracy in England, they had a lot of land and they started just kicking the serfs off the land, and people that kind of like were free peasants on the land, they just started kicking them off the land en masse, because the English were trading with the Dutch, and the Dutch were kind of doing a lot of manufacturing. And so, like, the English were just like, hey, let's get a whole bunch of sheep on here and just remove the people that live on the land. And so, like, they got involved in, like, kind of merchant commerce, kind of dealings, these landed gentry, these class of landowners, and like they just shoot people off the land so they could put sheep there and then get in on the wool trade. And like these groups of wage laborers kind of were just like, all these free people that were freed from the land kind of thing, were just like wandering around kind of aimlessly, and were causing problems. And so like there was a freed up labor force before the onset of like capitalists kind of making like evolving into industrial capitalism anyway. And so like there is usually this myth that like kind of capitalists just came along, like the bourgeoisie just decided to kind of just try industry out, like kind of thing. And like there was a lot of mechanisms going on in the background which kind of preceded this class being able to do that. There needed to be a heightened sense of commerce and trade and money in circulation, wealth accumulation, and already a freed up section of the labor force where you get wage workers. And so, as he described it, kind of wage workers are free to choose their master, kind of thing. But like they're still bound by the fact that they have to sell themselves to survive in this system. So they're bound to their wage labor, as opposed to being bound to the land directly and laboring upon that. So the merchant slash middle class doesn't play as much of a role as the bourgeoisie claims. Oh, that's a good question, or a good way of saying it. I think there was just a lot of historical factors that went in to make kind of this perfect storm of bourgeois society, if that makes sense. It's always told, it's just like, hey man, like these entrepreneurial bourgeoisie were just like, we're just gonna like, we've got a little bit of wealth and we've saved really hard because we're industrious. And then he started off with these little industries, and it just was a store, like, it was a force that just took over the world kind of thing. And it was like, well, there were a lot of factors like coming in together at this time that helped allow this to happen. Like, look at what the Spanish had been doing kind of in the Americas. All of the value that they literally pillaged and stole from the New World helped accumulate capital back in the Old World to help kickstart the early parts of a capitalist mode of production. But like a lot of things had to kind of just fall into place over a long period of time. So like starting from the 1300s onwards, little bits here, little bit of changes there to free up and produce all the conditions for a capitalist kind of takeover. So it's not just their entrepreneurial spirit that created the world as we know it today. Middle class should be separated into two categories: upper part of the lower class and the lower part of the upper class. I think that's a good point. And that's why I don't like the people using the word like middle class and stuff like that, because like it confuses things. Like, because like the bourgeoisie particularly use it, or bourgeois society uses it as like kind of this group where it's just like, oh look, everyone's in the happy middle. There might be like a slither of rich people at the top, and like, yeah, but it's not that bad because most people are in the happy middle, and there might be a small group of like poor people at the bottom, but like everyone's in the happy middle, and it's like used as this kind of propaganda tool to like to keep us all thinking that the system actually benefits the large majority of people because everyone's kind of in the middle class, the lower middle class and the upper middle class kind of thing. So like there are segments of it, but like I do want to acknowledge the power of the middle class because like most of like the, I guess, the progressive or revolutionary thought that you have in a given epoch comes from the middle class, because like they're the class that is kind of, or the group in society that has seen or tasted what life can be like at the top, but they're also humble enough, or they're low enough to be humbled by what goes on in the laboring classes of society. So they kind of see the best of both worlds, just like a middle child, I guess, and they want a lot of attention. And so like they are like a revolutionary force. So like, you know, as much as I don't like to use that terminology because it doesn't have like a good materialist position, they are a force to be reckoned with, the old middle class. Hello, wings of cheese. They have descended into the building. It is good to see you. Happy Monday. I hope you're enjoying it. And to all the working people in the stream today, I hope you're enjoying your Monday. If you're coming in from another country which hasn't experienced Monday yet, let me just tell you the future is bright here on this revolutionary channel. And so like, yeah, I just wanted to add in like, there is this misconception that like capitalism kind of, yeah, just happened because of like the industriousness of the capitalist or something like that. But like, yeah, like I said, there was a lot of stuff that really fell into place for this to be able to get kickstarted. And he's touched on the financial sector, but I would say actually finance has less to do with the onset of capitalism and more to do with like turbocharging like the industrial revolution, which is like a further development of capitalism. I think capitalism developed before the industrial revolution in like simple manufacture. Like, you know, think about what's his name, Forrest loves this one, the old pin factory in Adam Smith. Middle class equals propaganda to be like, you have enough, completely forgetting capitalists exist. They do it partly because a bourgeois member can claim to be middle class if they make a certain amount of money without pointing out they control industries. It helps the narrative. Yeah. And hence why I used the term propaganda. It's a tool in the ideological framework which controls all of our thinking. And like, this is the narrative that kind of like, you know, it helps kind of push this idea that like, you know, it's really entrepreneurial spirit that has delivered us the wonder that we have today. And like, if you're not really in on that, like, it's a question, it's like, are you really entrepreneurial enough? Maybe you're not meant to be an entrepreneur or something like that, and you don't deserve to enjoy this type of society. So just accept your class, accept your position as someone who exchanges their labor and gets a wage and gets to live in this wonderful industrial society kind of thing. So let's let him continue.
Profits came to completely dominate rents. But this was not just in terms of their relative size in the economy. The transition from feudalism to capitalism was, in essence, a shift of the power to command from landowners to owners of capital goods. Roll forward to today, and landowners...
Let's see if that's right. I'm not going to do this every time, but I just want to see if this guy's taking Yanis out of context and can be trusted. Because like, he seems like he's got a ponytail and glasses. So like, you know, he appears to be like kind of on the money, but like, you never know if he's up to no good, taking Yanis Varoufakis out of context. Let's see, 61. The transition, this is the one, the transition from feudalism to capitalism was, in essence, a shift of the power to command from landowners to owners of capital. For that to happen, peasants had first to lose autonomous access to common lands. That's why the enclosures in Britain were essential to capitalism's birth. They denied British labour the opportunities Peel's work is discovered in Western Australia. So, like, they didn't have land, basically. These workers, let's say these serfs or these people, once they were released from their feudal bonds, they had nothing anyway. They were landless, they were propertyless. What the hell else were they going to do? They were vagabonds for the most part, and they were just like, clumping up, like clogging up in urban areas and like making life hard for others. And so, like, they were becoming a problem. And so, like, capitalists kind of sucked up the additional labor. So yeah, the conditions were right, let's say. But like he's not really taking him out of context, which is
Owners
nice.
of capital goods. Roll forward to today, and Varoufakis argues that that era of capitalism is over, as we've entered a new phase that he calls Techno Feudalism, as the power to command politics and society has shifted again, this time to the owners of what he calls cloud capital. So, under techno-feudalism, rather than having vassals and their fief, we have cloudalists with their cloud capital. The well-known cloud fiefs of this system include companies like Facebook, Google, Amazon, and Apple. And we, as consumers, are the new cloud serfs, bound to these various fiefs in ways that we cannot extricate ourselves from. If our whole social life is on Facebook, we can't just take it elsewhere. If we buy an iPhone, a cut of all our future in-app purchases goes to Apple. And every time we use these cloud technologies, they learn about our behaviors and subtly change our experiences on each platform to influence us to spend more time and more money within the particular cloud fief into which we've become enmeshed. And indeed, unlike the costly efforts required to sustain traditional capital, Varoufakis claims that cloud capital, in contrast, can reproduce itself in ways that involve no wage labor. How? By commanding almost the whole of humanity to chip into its reproduction for free. People writing tweets, building friendship networks, watching content, indeed making content like YouTube videos, all build the value of cloud capital and further train its AI algorithms to be better influencers of us all. We're helping to build the cloud fiefs to which we are bound. But furthermore, Varoufakis argues this power of the new cloudalists to command extends over the capitalists who are now similarly bound to use platforms like Amazon in order to sell their products. And just like vassals paying rent to their overlord, the vassal capitalists have to pay substantial rent to the cloudalists for the privilege of operating in their cloud fiefdom. The workers are now cloud proles who have every facet of their workplace monitored and coordinated.
Cloud proles is an interesting one. We didn't touch on that the other day. But like, yeah, cloud proles are kind of people that are obviously proletariat. They work for a capitalist of some sort, but they may work directly for a techno feudalist, or a capitalist who works for a techno feudalist. And like a cloud prole is kind of like someone who works at the whim of an algorithm, and like they're monitored basically. Like, like workers have always been monitored. Like, hey, you have a tea break and you're allowed to go out for smoko or something like that, and like you get lunch. But like, and then like, there's performance measures and things like that. But like they're literally being monitored now by algorithms. So like maybe before you had like one manager to every, I don't know, let's just pick a ratio out of the sky, a manager to every 10 workers or something like that. But now algorithms give people jobs and monitor like kind of everything they do. To the millisecond. So like if you're an Uber driver or something like that, you're being watched by the algorithm. You're interacting with an algorithm, and like you're getting your work through a techno feudal structure. So through the cloud, you're not really dealing with people. And so like people have called this like kind of the gig economy and like the precariat, because they don't really work in a formal style of labor arrangement. So like they don't have like proper conditions, and like they don't have proper like rights. They're really just like a small business owner. They're their own entity, and they work directly for the algorithm, like in like Amazon warehouses and stuff. Like, there have been cases where like, people get monitored so closely, right? Like if they stop for like a minute or something like that, like the alarm goes off, management gets kind of gets alerted to it. If they go for a toilet break, they're being monitored by the entire system, and their management will get alerted and stuff like that. And they have to produce like certain things. They have to be able to like pack so many boxes within such a time frame, like 100 boxes every half an hour or something like that. And they're being fully monitored by like algorithms and stuff. And like the height of like how kind of impersonal, alienating, and inhumane this type of work gets is that like they're being monitored so closely in terms of their performance, and like whether they have like a 5 second lapse where they're like not concentrating on what they're doing. And like people have had medical emergencies in Amazon warehouses. Like in America there was a case where someone like had a heart attack, and like they're monitored so closely they can't even go to the toilet. But like this person had a heart attack, fell on the floor, and like was on the floor for like 10 minutes at least before a manager showed up. And if they had stopped working or something like that, like went to the toilet or something like that, then manager would have come and done something. But like this person collapsed on the floor, and like no one came and helped them for like 10 minutes and did anything about it for like 10 minutes apparently. And like that 10 minutes was the time an ambulance could have rocked up and saved them, because they had like a heart attack or something like that. So like this stuff gets really detached, like I said, alienated. And like this is what cloud proles are, like people that are kind of employed by through directly or not through cloudalists, and are monitored in ways that we thought not possible in liberal societies. This is like a new form of totalitarianism, like we've not seen before, I would say. You made a reaction video in defense of capitalism. You had a better understanding of capitalism than the libertarians trying to defend it 200 years ago. People just created capitalism. Yeah, it's just like it just popped out of nowhere, like kind of thing. That was mostly their point from memory. Yeah, it was. So today's serfs are the customers. Yes, in a sense, like today's serfs are anyone who is like kind of plugged into the matrix and like helps create data for the use of cloudless to control people's behavior more, and control like kind of what they do more. So like cloud serfs are people that like create value like a serf did on the land, and they just like give it over. Everything goes to the landlord, to the lord, and like the lord decides whether they see any more of that value. Like now, like we just produce value just by like picking up our phone, like kind of thing. We produce value, and then it goes straight to the cloudless. And like I was saying last week, the devil's bargain in that scenario is like, oh, but it's convenient. Like, like I get to connect with my family on the other side of the world, or like, um, Amazon suggests something that I didn't even know I wanted. It knows me better than I do. Like, and then everyone's just like, that's convenient, like kind of thing. And so that's the trade-off. So you're a cloud surf if you somehow produce value for that contributes back to the data collection and resource management of some type of cloud capitalist organization. That's one of the reasons why we were talking about last week that Elon Musk bought bought Twitter, and then turned it into X. He wanted access to more data. Like he gets it from his Tesla fleet, but like that's not enough. Like that's just the people in society who can afford to buy a Tesla, and so he can watch them as they drive around wherever they're driving their vehicles. But like he wants access to more of that. He wants people to download the app and have it on their phone, and then once you download the app, then you agree to have like kind of them access and do what they want with it, which includes going out to third parties. And that's when the third parties come in and they're allowed to kind of data mine you and like take all the information and monitor you through your phone or something like that. And then like that's the real information that has power. It's not only power because like they can sell it to other third parties, but like they can also get valuable information about what populations are doing and use that to make their own strategic decisions, political or economic, whatever, social engineering decisions, whatever they may be. But yes, cloud serfs are all of us, including members of the capitalist class and the bourgeoisie and stuff like that. Like if they're plugged into the matrix somehow and they help provide data, then like we're all cloud serfs nowadays. At drunk ancestor, welcome. I don't think I've seen you. Anybody can rent a cloud service. Anybody can create a new cloud service. Anybody can buy shares in cloud technology companies. Where's the injustice? Well, it depends what you mean by injustice, I guess. That's really kind of the only way to answer your question is, what do you mean by injustice? Like I said, people find it very convenient that these cloudalists, these techno feudalists, whatever you want to call them, are providing services and linking people together. The point is, or the issue is, that they have total control over that infrastructure. And the real question is, if you are producing value, so like let's say you go online and you produce data or something like that, whether or not you should be paid for your value. Like, you know, if this stuff is so valuable, conglomerations and magnitudes of data from, you know, billions of people across the planet, which is obviously very valuable, because everybody, like these big companies, are trying to get in on the game. This is how the tech bros wield such power. Then, like, you know, obviously this is valuable to them. And if it's valuable to them and worth so much money, then why shouldn't it not be valuable to us too? And should we, ultimately the question is, should we get a cut in that as cloud serfs if they are skimming value off us, by, like, you know, us getting free apps and services and stuff like that? Should we get a cut in all of that? So the injustice is really up to you to decide there. Did I miss a whole bunch of stuff in the chat? Oh, I think I did. This diagram about Techno Feudalism is interesting. How packages could a package pick if a package could pick packages? Yeah, it's a bit like that. Layers on layers and layers. So around unequal exchange, that leaves a few real winners. It is an unequal exchange in that sense, yes. Ancestor, welcome. Katea, they'll claim capitalism serves the people when, even though otherwise has been proven. It's funny how people just insult Musk on his website. Who would buy Twitter? Like, even for the data, Twitter, that's a fate worse than death. I would hate that. Yeah, but like, it just shows you how desperately he wants access to data and a media source too. Like, you know, what's he doing at the moment? Like, he's really pushing a political agenda and like going there around the world doing it. Like, the Europeans are not too happy with Musk at the moment, like politically, because like, you know, he's just going around like trying to influence other people's elections and stuff like that. But like, you can do that with, one, a media source, and two, an app that like people download and gives you access to basically all of their daily habits. And it's always through regurgitated propaganda. So much for Silicon Valley is based around, so much of Silicon Valley is based around data, but isn't the value of our data mostly only speculated as valuable and probably highly overvalued? Sites like Facebook and Instagram barely turn a profit. See, that's interesting that you say that, because I've heard someone talk about like the fact that these guys don't actually turn a profit. And like, that is true that they don't turn a profit, but like, that is in like the sense that we would understand a traditional business as turning a profit, because like, they're not producing kind of any value. They don't really have large scores of wage laborers that work for them. They've got like, you know, technicians and people that work in customer service and stuff like that. And so like, they're not really turning a profit. as such in the traditional sense, because they're not hiring wage labor to do all of their work for them, and then like skimming off the top of that produce. A lot of their stuff comes from revenue, subscription, and like advertising money, and all that sort of stuff, and obviously a lot of tricky accounting, I would say. So a lot of them there would be setting up like businesses, and like parent companies, and like trading in certain ways between certain companies to be able to shift any profits that they have around the globe, in order to kind of like not have to pay tax anywhere, or like demonstrating somehow they're not making money here. They're not making, actually we're running at a loss here because we actually have to pay some company somewhere else. And like a lot of these companies, the way that they work now is like they just buy back their own stocks, really, and kind of just sit on like assets, in a speculative sense, as opposed to just taking things out and using real assets. As far as I remember, the ones who do turn a profit pivoted to doing something material and tangible, like Amazon, or I guess Facebook pivoting to Facebook Marketplace. Those companies are rich anyway. They are incredibly rich. I see how it's very similar to feudalism. Yeah, especially with like a diagram like this. If the issue is centralization, that's different. Yeah, I think the issue, like, it depends what you mean by centralization, but like if you mean the conglomeration of this type of infrastructure in the hands of a very few number of tech bros that really control a lot, then that is a problem. And like I was saying, kind of, I don't know how to say this, but like without using a throwaway term, because I don't really like this term, but like democratizing it. Or like giving people access to their data so they are able to decide who should benefit off it and not, or like they should get a cut of any profits made on their data. Decentralizing it in that way would be a good way to handle it, I think. Your chat on screen isn't synced with the real chat. Yes. Okay. I don't know why. Not turning a profit is the now traditional race for ubiquity and network effects, a la Uber, Amazon, etc. 4AS to Cindy Skull. I'd also be skeptical of using profit in the traditional sense with these sort of businesses. Michael West Media has exposed many of these types of businesses who do creative accounting. Basically, their profit suddenly gets expended by professional fees. I think that we are over-indexing on this not making a profit thing. They make plenty of profit. My chat keeps getting cut off. I guess it's too long. It was about the injustice implied by feudalism. Yeah, we get regularly cut off here. That's right. Welcome to the censor channel. Yeah. We get censored. I'm not sure why. Well, we're dangerous, aren't we? Hey, a bunch of renegades in here. We are. Need to be censored. And like that's part of this kind of techno-feudalist stuff, is just like you're on their platform and like you do what they tell you kind of thing. So like, it's social to the extent that like you can interact with other people, but social is incredibly curated by whatever the algorithm allows you to do. And like who gives the algorithm its objectives? It is these cloudalists here. They are the ones that say what words should or should not be allowed, what conversations should and should not be allowed. And we should be under no false pretenses that like these type of automated systems, this digital landscape is like the public domain, in which like, if I go out and have a conversation with someone on the street, they will hear every word that I'm saying. Whether they comprehend what I'm saying, that's another question, but they can hear it. Okay. But like right now, like Drunk Ancestor has proven once again that like if you can type something in here, it's definitely not going to be broadcast to everyone that is having this conversation at the moment. And like that's part of techno-feudalism, is this idea of complete control, like total control over everything. And Yanis breaks that down quite well, I think.
By the same cloud technologies, giving the cloudalists even more influence over the economy and requiring the capitalist vassals to pay even more rent to the cloudalist class. But notice that even the richest cloudalist like everyone else, is sometimes in the role of being a cloud serf. And Varoufakis has another whole thread that
Like, that's not so insightful, right? Because like in capitalism, like everyone, even the richest people in the bourgeoisie and stuff like that, the top of the top of the top of the 1% kind of thing, like they still consume, and they consume capital goods. So like, you know, consumers, everyone's a consumer, so everyone's potentially prey to the products of capitalism.
relates to the way that financialization and the response of the central banks to the financial crash and then the COVID pandemic means that companies building cloud capital often don't seem to care about generating profits, but would rather grow the scale of their fiefdom from which they can generate ongoing rents. Looked at in totality, it becomes apparent that the world economy is lubricated less and less with profit and increasingly with cloud rent. And indeed, this sense with profit and increase.
So I'm just going to check him again. Give me a second. See if he's not misquoting him. Or like taking him out of context, I shouldn't say. I don't know why he would misquote him. Looked at in totality, it becomes apparent that the world economy is lubricated less and less with profit and increasingly with cloud rent. And so the delightful antimony of our era comes into focus. Capitalist activity is growing within the same process of energetic capital accumulation that degrades capitalist profit and gradually replaces capitalist markets with cloud thieves. In short, capitalism is withering as a result of burgeoning capitalist activity. It is through capitalist activity that Techno Feudalism was born and is now sweeping to power. So like what he's saying here as well is that like not only is the world economy becoming more and more dependent on like just being fed money through the money circulation and money supply from central banks, but like capital markets and capitalists become less and less important because marketplaces, physical marketplaces, are disappearing and are being replaced by digital infrastructure, and digital infrastructure is completely controlled. It's no longer a marketplace kind of thing, situation that you're dealing with in the traditional capitalist sense, which is a big call. It's like a massive change to the capitalist system because, like, you know, it does rely on producing value to create profits for the basis of the entire system. That's where GDP comes from. That's where like kind of the basis for any of the money that we get to kind of develop society. And like, let's just say you took this to an extreme and like techno feudalists kind of controlled everything, and everything you wanted to buy had to go through, I don't know, some type of internet transaction now that was controlled by some cloudalist. A cloudalist that never paid rent, that never paid any tax because they don't make any profits really because of their accounting tricks and their terminology, then like society would start to lose out on massive tax revenue, and like we'd begin to kind of, society would become less and less of what we see around us today in terms of the services that are being provided and the networks and all that sort of stuff. And like we'd just have to retreat into our own little domiciles and just like stay in touch and work and live vicariously through digital means and the digital realm, like virtually. It's interesting. How do you feel about Blue Sky then? That is a decentralized cloud. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not on Blue Sky. And like, it depends what you mean by decentralized cloud. Does that mean that it's like owned by a collective or something like that? Or like it's a system that doesn't work on like an algorithm that is geared towards, I don't know, data collection and profiteering? It's open source, like as in the infrastructure behind Blue Sky is open source, so anyone can get access. It's got it does have custom algorithms, but like people can input their own and change the algorithms and stuff like that. Anybody can make an algorithm. Yeah, it's good. I guess that's much better. If they can make an algorithm that helps find them an audience and suit their needs, that's more democratized, using that throwaway term again, than any other type of platform, like from these techno feudalists. But like, in the same sense that, starting up a cooperative or a co-op or something like that, like might be something that is not the usual capitalist endeavor, but like having a co-op isn't going to change capitalism. So like, having open source social media agencies, it's not going to bring down techno feudalism if it's just one thing at a time, I guess. Thinking of Mastodon, not Blue Sky. Mastodon is for sure decentralized. I think Blue Sky is the ex Twitter guy. All right, let's continue.
Increasingly with cloud rent. And indeed, this sense that rents are once again dominating over profits is the most persuasive part of Varoufakis' claim that we're back to feudal-like times. This all sounds plausible, so easy to nod your head along to. So why am I not convinced? I think we can see where this analogy breaks down if we scratch just a little bit at the idea that Amazon.com is a new kind of cloud fiefdom. And to be clear, this is not a defense of Amazon's monopolistic, predatory corporate behavior. I'm just not convinced by Varoufakis' claim that the best way to understand what's going on here is that we've entered an entirely new political economic era. For example, Varoufakis argues that Amazon uses its cloud algorithms through devices like their Alexa assistant to influence you, to shape your desires for which products to buy. Alexa trains us to train it better. Before long, it is training us to train it, to train us, to train it, to train us, ad infinitum. This infinite loop, or regress, allows Alexa and the great algorithmic network hiding in the cloud behind it to guide our behavior in ways superbly lucrative for its owner. This is the essence of algorithmic, cloud-based command capital. Really? I mean, I don't own an Alexa, but I do have Google Home Assistants, and at best the interactions with these assistants is very sporadic and transactional. And I don't imagine that there are many people spending hours engaging with the Amazon website compared to sites and apps like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Those platforms really do draw in people's attention in ways that allow them to actually influence their thinking, which is why advertising on those platforms is so huge. So yeah, those social media platforms are the new media barons, but not Amazon. Sure, Amazon will nudge its customers a little here and there with book recommendations and other promotional offers. But despite being algorithmically boosted, this isn't that radically different from the way that traditional supermarkets and other retailers have promoted cross-selling and upselling for decades. Then Varoufakis notes that Amazon is not an open market where sellers and buyers can...
Slow down. So what was his point there? That like basically just because they might listen to you, like Alexa might listen to you or something like that and suggest things, like that is not that outrageous, and like this type of stuff has been going on forever where people suggest things for you to buy. I think that's what he was saying. And like he was then saying, oh, but on social media there's actually a lot more opportunity for that to happen, so it could happen on social media because that's when everyone spends their time. So like, what is he saying? It does influence you and modify your behavior, or it doesn't? Because like, if it is the case that it is, but like he's just saying that can only happen on social media but not on Amazon or something, like what is his point? Because he's just said in the same sentence that social media does have the ability to modify your behavior if it's drawing in your attention, and that's where all the advertising revenue comes. So like, I'm not sure actually what he's critiquing there. He's saying that it is possible and it can happen on social media, but it's probably not going to happen on Amazon because who spends long on Amazon anyway? Now let me give you a story from Shoshana Zuboff, the lady that wrote Surveillance Capitalism, and like she tells of a story of this gentleman, like, this is just to show you how intricately all this is tied, because I think Yanis Varoufakis does have a point to say that, like, okay, fine, he has a Google Home Assistant, but, like, he doesn't really talk to it, so, like, it's not really controlling him or anything like that. But, like, there was a lady, and this is like more of an example of kind of privacy invasion, I guess you would say. But there was a case, I think it was in the UK, where there was a lady who was suing Facebook, I believe, one of the social media giants. Anyway, her father, like, came to her house, like, bashing the door down kind of thing, and being like, oh, why didn't you tell me you were pregnant? Like, you never tell me anything, like, kind of thing. And she was like, what are you talking about, Dad? I have no idea what you're talking about. And, like, he was like, I'm getting ads on my email that are coming through to buy, like, baby goods and stuff like that. So, like, obviously it's pinned me as a grandparent and wants me to buy stuff, like, for newborns, because it thinks, because it knows you're pregnant. Why didn't you tell me? And she was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not pregnant. Anyway, she went and did a pregnancy test after that in interaction with her father, and she was indeed pregnant. Now, she had no idea. However, she had recently changed shampoos that she was buying through Amazon or something like that. And what had happened was she had changed subconsciously to a type of shampoo that has less of a scent, and the algorithm had learned that women that change to this shampoo, that has, like, less of a scent to it or something like that, are usually women that are pregnant and they can't handle the smell of it anymore. And so the algorithm, by massive volume and dealing with these types of interactions before, put two and two together. That information was sold onto a third party, etc., 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 and it somehow got to the father, that, like, this woman was pregnant, and so the people that bought the data of the girl and all of her social connections and all of her spending habits put two and two together that she was pregnant, and started pushing newborn paraphernalia onto the father. And she ended up, by some roundabout way, trying to sue the social media agency that, like, facilitated all of her data being extracted from her and given out to third parties and stuff like that. So, like, this this idea that your behavior can be modified, and you can be kind of told to do things, by very intricate algorithms that are collecting data and putting things together about very intricate social relations and very intricate physiological, like, phenomenon that occur within the human body, and putting all of that together to make, like, market-based decisions to help control you and get you to buy stuff, to the benefit of whoever it is, that's going to sell that product at the end of the day. Like, it's not that far-fetched, like, all of this sort of stuff. And this happened, like, 5 or more years ago. This wasn't like something that just happened, like, yesterday or something. Like, this was years ago now, like, before, like, the pandemic and stuff like that. And so, like, they've been testing this stuff and developing this type of technology with this intention of, like, total control and understanding. It's all built on this kind of pyramid, this intricate infrastructure of data collection. And that's why data is so important. And, like, calling people data serfs, and, like, getting access to the volume and the power that comes with ultimate data control. It's really not that far-fetched, all of this type of stuff. So, like, I'm not sure what case he's making, but maybe he'll expand upon that a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe he will. Don't hold your breath. This man looks like a cigarette spokesperson. He'll start shilling asbestos filters soon. um, Home assistants and other products can still monitor you and your data. Yeah, I think they can. They absolutely don't monitor you. That would show up as a massive data spike on your internet bill. Well, look, they do monitor you. Depends what you mean by, like, monitoring exactly, whether someone's paying attention or not. But, like, there are places in, like, I think India, elsewhere in South Asia, where, like, there are whole kind of warehouses, like sweatshops, let's call them, full of people that are basically tapping into an Alexa or a Google Home device and just listening. And like I've read interviews of these people and stuff, and they're like, most of the time we just hear people talking, or like we're listening to nothing because like maybe they're not at home. And then like, occasionally you'll hear people having sex, or like they say the most confronting stuff is where you hear domestic violence. And stuff like that, and you hear like someone beating the shit out of somebody else or hurling abuse at them and stuff. But like they say, like they listen in, and they listen out for like keywords and stuff like that, because sometimes they can sell products to people and push products on people. So like this sort of stuff does happen. They do monitor people, and like some people do experiments where they talk in front of their phone, and like they say a product enough or a topic enough, and they get onto Facebook or something like that, and then they're like, oh, look, look, here's an ad for that exact thing that we've just been talking about. So like, there is like arguments that like they are monitoring people, and people have done investigations into it and stuff. There was a case targeted advertising products for babies. She got pregnant. Oh my God. That's the one I was trying to talk about. Yeah, it's wild. It is wild, isn't it? That's fucking wild. And it was 10 years ago. At what point does the secrecy of algorithms as trade secrets conflict with evidence discovery, if such a story ever goes to court? That's a good question. It's a really good point. Oh, David's in here. Yo, 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 David, welcome. I am not ruling out my naivety, but I do trace routes and scan ports, and I know that if these devices were monitoring us the way that people imagine it, would be easy to spot, right? They would only need to monitor you on the other end, or at the ISP, or at any of the points on the aforementioned trace route. Damn, Cindy, you're across this stuff. Are you like in tech or something like that? It is pretty wild. There are new people in the chat, aren't there? Welcome to the chat. I think what 4S is trying to say is, oh yeah, that plug. He actually did say it straight away. All right, I'm going to plug the Discord. So like if you are here and you have not been here before, or if you're not on the Discord, and you want to continue to have these conversations, that's where we like trade propaganda and trade secrets and talk about Alexa and other stuff that's going on. So like if you want to come over and join the chat, here's an invite to that. If you are interested, if you're liking the stream, and you're enjoying this type of conversation, and you don't want to miss out on any more, go over and join, become a free member on Patreon, so I can get notifications to you about this type of content. There it is. I did my job. 4AS. Spicy today. It is spicy, and there's some real actual tech talk going on here as well. Poor guy, he's completely oblivious that the more he talks about Amazon, the more he proves Varoufakis is right. Yeah, good old. Yeah, it's like there's a part of me like I will get to my thoughts on Techno Feudalism at the end. But like there's a big part of me that doesn't want to believe in Techno Feudalism, because I don't want to think that like there is this type of kind of situation and control going on, because like within the capitalist structure built on the ideas of liberalism, there's still a lot of freedom invested in the capitalist system, because like it's predicated on allowing people to be as free as possible so they can engage in free exchange, and like free exchange helps the economy go around, and if the economy is good then society is good, kind of thing. Society comes last, but like at least if like people are freer, they can exchange better, and then that's a good society. Like this sort of stuff, like the techno feudal stuff, has got nothing to do with good society at all. It doesn't matter, actually. It's not about creating society. It's actually smashing society into tiny little pieces, putting everyone in a little box if they could, and just like plugging them in so they can monitor what they're doing, and they can make sure that they're choosing the right stuff. The best types of people are the people that can be monitored completely, and be told what to consume and when to consume it. So like this is some matrix verging kind of stuff that's going on here. So like I really hope it's wrong. I hope it's wrong, because like I don't want to live in that type of world, man, like kind of thing. So but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. But like I do want to let this guy finish, because like I did say that I would let him talk, and I keep interrupting him. Sorry, Ollie Sharp. My apologies to you, good sir.
interact freely. When you look for, say, a toaster, Amazon controls which actual products it puts in front of you. But again, this is just as true for traditional supermarkets. If you drive to Walmart looking for a toaster, they have already pre-selected which few brands you'll be able to choose from. So yeah, Amazon is more like a supermarket than a village market, but just because it's online, that doesn't make it a new phenomenon, requiring a new way to understand the economic dynamics going on. And arguably, it was the bricks and mortar, large, out-of-town supermarket chains that did most to originally limit our choice of where to shop, as they made it so convenient to do all your shopping in one place that it decimated the variety of shops on the high street. That had nothing to do with cloud computing, but had a similar monopolistic style dynamic of dominating a market. Amazon's
Okay, so like what he's talking about here, which is like a good point, is like this idea that like at a certain point, like industrial capitalists, let's say, like the people that produce the stuff that's in a supermarket, and agriculturalists, but let's just call them all industrial capitalists, they are very much at the mercy of merchant capitalists. So like the merchant capitalists kind of buy the produce of the industrial capitalists and then sell that on to the final consumer. And so like in that situation, the industrial capitalists, unless they go to market themselves and sell their own goods, like they are actually giving up power there, because they can only realize their profit if the merchant is willing to buy their stuff. And so like you could make the best product, but like if you can't get it in front of anyone's eyes, because there's no merchant capitalists out there that will, like, you know, big supermarket chain, Walmart, Woolies, like something like that, if they won't take your stuff, then like you could have the best products in the world, but you're never going to get it out to anyone. And so he's describing that phenomenon, which is like the merchant capitalist in the real capitalist world, is just like, you know, Amazon trading platform, like kind of online, like what's the difference, Facebook marketplace, like what have you, Alibaba. Like if they don't want to touch your stuff, just like a traditional merchant capitalist, then you're never going to sell stuff anyway. But like I would just caveat that in the sense that like in the past, there was no alternative either. So like, you know, you really just went to the supermarket, or you went straight to the producer, you drove to their warehouse and tried to buy stuff off them directly. But like in a system that is transitioning away, where like capitalism is kind of withering, let's say, and like people are spending more and more of their time online, and people start transitioning more and more to systems where they're doing everything online, which is completely like reasonable to think about, in the sense that like this is not something that's going to happen overnight. Like, you know, maybe your grandparents or something like that, they don't have a phone and they don't do any of their stuff online. They do everything in the physical realm. Maybe they still use a checkbook or something like that. They don't even have like a debit card or a credit card or something like that. But like those people are going, kind of thing. And like the new generations will only ever know things being bought and sold and traded online. And so they will only know systems where like what they have is being completely controlled by an algorithm, as opposed to like a business which is making decisions about which products to sell in its store or not. Because like you can go to that store and you can decide, like, you know, what's in front of you on the shelves. But like the difference with techno feudalism is another step upon that. Whereas like Amazon might have like, you know, 10 different types of chair that it has access to, but it only chooses to show you 5 of those chairs. There has been instances, and this is something that Amazon does, and this is part of, I guess, a merging together of capitalism and techno feudalism, where there have been people that have like designed stuff, right, that like they knew, you know, that like it was a new product, it was killer, and like they put it on Amazon, it was going off chops, everyone was buying it, very, very profitable. Amazon's just like, fuck, that's a really good product, we can make that the same thing cheaper. And so like Amazon, through their own manufacturing systems, which they can do if they like, you know, have so much capital at their disposal, makes the exact same product and then stops selling that on their platform, or like cuts people out from seeing that other product that they're now competing with. So they don't cut them off entirely. They don't say, no, you can no longer trade on our platform. But like they take their product, they sell their own version of it for much cheaper, and then they start restricting who can see it and who can't. And again, this guy would argue, I guess, that like that could happen like, with Walmart or something like that, or that could happen at a supermarket. But like those supermarkets and all that sort of stuff would have to then invest in being the capitalist as well. But like the thing with Techno Feudalists, because they have apps like such control here, we're talking about like on global scales, they may even take over the production process, or parts of the production process themselves, to completely annihilate the capitalist class. And like if they act more like Techno Feudalists than capitalists do, because they're not employing labor, they're just doing this through algorithms and machines and stuff like that, and they're breaking down like that system of like employing labor to produce surplus value that makes profit, etc., etc. It is a fundamental breakdown of the entire system. It's not just like, oh well, now like they're just going to take over and control kind of what we see, and they're going to take over that whole system. If they're automating everything now, and using algorithms and like artificial intelligence to control the entire process, like is that really just like employing labor to do a job now? Like labor is in that circumstance like being controlled by an intelligent machine, if it's necessary at all. And like humans have been cogs and have been used to supplement machines and like used in the process, but like we haven't like physically being controlled by machines before, in this sense, like actually being told to do by machines. We've been like alienated from the process and had to be subservient to machines because like they control manufacturing, they control the productive process, and like we just slot in kind of thing. And like we're not even really thinking about what we're doing, but we're not being told what to do. But like right now, the algorithms are actually telling people out of what to do, and it's all at the behest of cloudlists, apparently. So like, I understand what he's saying. This stuff has traditionally happened before, but at this scale and at this level of concentration, and with these type of factors, I don't think there's ever been this type of level of control and centralization in a market setting anyway. I think it's worth thinking about and putting thought into how data can be used. I definitely agree. People imagine it different and more 1984 than reality, but I don't think that detracts from the fact that surveillance and data collection is widespread. Snowden left, no doubt. I think in Germany is leading the way in legislation, but the Stasi are fresh in memory. Yeah, look, the whole of Europe, like Europe's actually got the tightest, like the EU has the tightest type of regulations in regards to kind of data provision and data privacy. I remember when I was in France a couple of years ago now, like, every time that I got on Google and like searched something, it was like I'd come up with a warning while I was over there. And it's just like, are you sure you want to do this? Do you know where your privacy is going and stuff? I'd never seen anything like that, but like it was coming up over there. And like that's why JD Vance was over there recently, just telling the Europeans basically how they're killing the American tech sector, and they're killing free speech, and like if they don't loosen up their regulations, they're all going to be in big trouble, because like they do have pretty tight regulations and rules around the Silicon Valley tech sector, and like but like all these regulations are like are very dated now. They're like applying rules of the game or regulating rules of the game from like 10 years ago, not rules of the game as they are being played now. And that's the real thing about these techno feudalists. They are creating the technology and writing the rules of the game like 10 years in advance of like the closest form of regulation. It's a bit depraved that people will grow up with tech bros calling the shots, and they'll grow up from the moment they're born, possibly in a techno feudal world. Yeah. And like, and like really like plugged into it too, like without knowing that like you can, go to a shop or something like that. Like I do know like people that like don't go out to eat, like kind of thing. Like they love fast food, or they love like a certain restaurant or something like that. But like that's just delivered to their door, and like they don't go outside, kind of thing. And like that's a big hit to like a traditional capitalist kind of economy, where you have people kind of interacting in the physical realm and exchanging with one another in that sense. If that is all controlled by like kind of one company and one entity from woe to go, like there's so many different kind of capitalists and businesses that can get involved in that entire process independently and deals with each other and have social relations with one another. But like if that whole process is coordinated by one site's algorithm, then like the social relations break down between the consumer and the rest of the players that are doing the production there. Like very, very different situation. They all then are kind of alienated from one another and controlled through a techno feudalist now. So it's a brave new world, that's for sure. Many people in Germany even do not have digital footprint at all, despite the protections in law. But they also have laws to stop employers calling you outside work hours. Yeah, the French are pretty good like that too. But my main point is that Yanis calls the current system techno feudalism to sell books, though, basically admitted in a talk about it. We are not cogs. We are free to do whatever we like. And that's what this guy's saying. He's like, it's a nice title, but like, yeah, what is it? Great title, but not a great book, like kind of thing. And like, yeah, I've heard Yanis very tongue-in-cheekly say that, like, we might not be there yet, but like the word techno-feudalism has been used because like it is impactful, kind of thing. And that's why like he interchanges like techno-feudalism is like, the name of the book kind of thing. And that's what the publishers want. But like most of the time he just talks about them as being cloudalists. And cloudalists is short form for cloud capitalists. So he's still calling them capitalist kind of thing. And so we're not cogs in this machine yet, but like again, and this guy took it out of context, and that's where I read the whole quote. Like Yanis has also said that like it's capitalism is withering away in the face of this type of cloud capital. And so like it's not gone, and we're not all like subservient to this. But like in a couple of generations' time, like you might not really recognize the world around you, or the world that you were born into anyway, if people increasingly become regulated by how they interact with the outside world through their phone. Like if you don't leave your house to eat, if you work from home and you don't have to go outside or anything like that, like, you will form a very different existence. Like there's a lot of people like post-COVID that I know as well, they don't even go shopping anymore. Like they have their groceries delivered to them. Like it is a transition. And like capitalism didn't happen overnight, as we were talking about earlier in this stream. Like it happened over like 300 or 400 years, the groundwork to produce the conditions that allowed capitalism to first start accumulating wealth in order to kickstart a capitalist venture. So like, it could just be the start. It really could just be the start, I guess. The systems are made by us. Anyone can learn to code. Anyone can spin up a server, aka a cloud. Just like anyone can start a business too, I guess. And anyone can be a capitalist. If you ever use Tor, you will notice most nodes are German, Swedish, and French, or a lot of. Yep. I wonder if the tech sector will go after Tor, or if it's still too valuable for the intel agencies. Tor is a honeypot. No. But again, it's easy to learn to code enough to create your own encryption systems and networks. Techno-feudalism is simply the next stage of capitalism as a system dominated by the tech sector. And that's been the discussion that I've been having for the last few months kind of thing, like on these streams, is like obviously the tech bourgeoisie, the tech section of the capitalist order is like really, really important. Now, like, Trump had the tech bros at his inauguration. And like they've been incredibly important, kind of, ever since, like, with the announcement of Project Stargate and like, all the endless talk about like the wonders of AI and all that sort of stuff. Like the tech bros and Silicon Valley are the new center of the capitalist bourgeoisie. Like they're the new focal point, like, the car manufacturers of old, or like the oil tycoons and the media barons of old and stuff like that. They are the center now of the capitalist universe and will be for the foreseeable future. And so, like, is it full blown techno feudalism? or is it like a new development of capitalism moving beyond like financialization and all that sort of stuff now into like digital control through digital landscapes? Techno feudalism is simply the next stage of capitalism. Yeah, as dominated by the tech sector. I'd say it's already here, to be honest. Peak spectacular society. Everything has a chip, and wars are being waged over rare earth and fabrication capabilities. That's an interesting point. Like the rare earth mineral stuff is very interesting. Like how like a lot of the foreign policy discussion now coming out of the US is just centers on getting access to as much rare earth minerals as possible, because like, you know, these are important elements in anything tech based. But like, you know, the processing of rare earth minerals, it's really funny. Like I think it's like 70% of the processing capability is in China, and 90% of the produce of rare earth minerals is done by China. So like it's like China is still the center of the globe when it comes to anything rare earth minerals. So it's quite a process processing rare earth minerals, apparently. Get on board or get deboard. Become a cyborg today. Brought to you by Amazon. Yeah, it's on the edge of fully becoming techno-feudal capitalism, especially with the favors Trump is doing for them. Yeah, the tech sector is like like I said, they're the focal point of the global bourgeoisie. All right, I'm going to let Ollie Sharp do his thing.
Dominance of online retail doesn't come from it having a fancy website with clever cloud-based algorithms. It comes from its vast material infrastructure that allows it to offer cheap prices and extremely fast delivery of goods to customers. If it stopped doing this, people would soon shop elsewhere. Indeed, because with Amazon you are shopping online, it allows for much more competition in theory. In a different browser tab, you could go to walmart.com or maybe go to explore ebay.com to look for toasters and maybe find a different range of products and prices with different delivery options. It's much easier to jump from one website to another than it is to drive.
Hello. Boo ads. Combank ad.
Town to town.
I just learned that Combank is like one of the wealthiest companies in the world. Like, you know, it's up there with the top 100 richest companies, corporations on earth. And it's like an Australian, like the old actual National Bank of Australia. Bastards.
In the old days. There are even now websites and apps that will aggregate for you the range of different choices you have from different online retailers. And there are people who choose to cut Amazon out of their lives entirely as they detest the way it treats its workers and suppliers. Now, having said that, there is an extraordinary statistic in Choke Point Capitalism about Amazon Prime's membership scheme. 1 in 2 American households are now members, and they're practically welded to the site. A recent study found just 1% of paid Prime members are likely to comparison shop elsewhere before making a purchase. That is huge market dominance. But Amazon hasn't entrapped us with a digital network effect like Facebook has. Our entrapment works through things like the psychology of having paid for delivery already, the brand confidence and sheer convenience of the quick deliveries from Amazon, plus the laziness of most of us not to just bother checking if anyone else is selling it cheaper and faster. These are all classic capitalist techniques for creating a moat through brand loyalty that protects a company from competition. So while algorithms and big data might help Amazon to do this more effectively, building such moats is not a new phenomenon. Indeed, similar scheming has been practiced by supermarkets and mail-order delivery companies for decades. So, as consumers, we may feel bound to Amazon, but we're only entrapped by tricks of the mind. serfs were bound by law.
Like, just one point on that. Like, he's saying that, like, as a consumer class, there's no difference. Like, he's saying as consumers, like, capitalists do the same stuff to their consumer as well. They create brand loyalty and they push people into certain market decisions by like mind tricks and psychological warfare and marketing and all that sort of stuff. And so, like, what's the difference? That's what capitalists do. But like, cloud serfs, remember, are not people that are not consumers exactly. Cloud serfs are people that produce value for the cloudlists through their actions, not just their consumer choices, but any action that they do. If, like, I'm wearing like some type of wearable device, every time my heart beats or it changes in terms of like how rapid it's beating or something like that, that's value for the cloudlist. And so the cloud surf is not just a consumer, okay, in this equation. They are someone who is offering value to the cloudlist for free. That's a very important distinction, and like something that I think you should focus more on than just being like, oh, well, they make money this way and they dominate markets and stuff like that. Capitalists have been dominating markets for a long time. Like, okay, fine, but like, you know, we have never been in a situation of such total surveillance and control. So maybe Shoshana's got the best definition of it so far, which is it's called surveillance capitalism. It's not called techno capitalism, it's not called techno feudalism, it's not called cloud capital or anything like that. This is called surveillance capitalism because they're monitoring you to like manufacture perfect market conditions for them to basically control the entire world's economy. And so, like, you know, if that is the end game here, controlling the entire world's economy was not really the point of like capitalism and like liberal capitalism and stuff like that. It was just about producing the best conditions for free market conditions. So, like, you know, people could continue to produce value. But like, if these guys aren't really too worried about the production of value, they just take any value and then use their cloud capital and their cloud infrastructure to push those values onto people so they can continue to stay on top and make, you know, profits and benefit from the system and stuff like that. That's just about control. That's just about control. It's got nothing to do with like markets and value production and all that sort of stuff. It's just about control. And that's the feudal element there. It's about complete and utter control over a populace.
Amazon's excessive power over suppliers is a different story. But again, it's not a new phenomenon. It's a classic distortion of a market when one or a few buyers dominate sellers. This situation is known as a monopsony, a complementary term to the more familiar situation of a monopoly. Again, supermarkets provide a non-tech example of monopsony-style market dynamics, when they, for example, squeeze the margins of milk producers whose main route to market is through the supermarket shelves. And indeed, through this monopsony power, the supermarkets take a significant cut of the final price of milk paid by the end customer. Middlemen taking an excessive markup has long been a form of rent-seeking behavior in capitalist markets. To quote again from Chokepoint Capitalism, we've seen it's supremely difficult to maintain the free conditions that are central to capitalism, since markets have such a strong natural tendency towards concentration, extraction, and rent-seeking. That's why ongoing interventions are needed, and why without them, we've ended up in another robber baron era. And notice that quote also ends with a nod to a feudal analogy, but it's in the context of this tendency being a well-known feature of capitalism that has been contended with since at least the 19th century, when the robber baron analogy was originally used. It's nothing new and nothing techno.
I think that's where this guy's kind of missing the point, unless he's going to surmise at the end and like wrap this up. But the techno point is the data. Like, no one in human history has ever pulled this amount of data before, or ever had the infrastructure possible to pull together this type of data and information on humans. Like, the best that like people could do was do like censuses and stuff like that, where they'd go around and like do a head count of the population, and there'd be taxes, there'd be tax collectors and accountants that worked for state bureaucracies, or like, or like other type of institutional like organizations, or something like large institutional organizations that would take like, tallies of the population and try and figure out demographics and information about societies and like the markets and commerce in their various like communities and stuff like that. But like no one has been able to have such understanding on the information on the individual, and that only comes about as a result of the techno infrastructure that is available because of the cloud and because of like our information technology and stuff like that. And so like it's only like it's abstract, and like it's really only allowed to do so because of telecommunications infrastructure that has developed under capitalism and has increased in its revolutionizing effect, like, over the last, like, I guess 30 years or something like that. But like, it's still a phenomenon that like kind of influences the way that society is structured, and it is a phenomenon that is changing our attitudes and the way that we relate to the world around us. And so like this guy is just drawing a whole bunch of correlations between techno feudalists and like monopoly, monopsony, and like how capitalists do the exact same thing when they control markets. But like this is not just about controlling markets. This is about a change in social relations, a change, therefore, in the ideological framework, and then a change in the way that like people's attitudes towards society and like one another are formed. And like people's attitudes towards each other and society are changing dramatically. They've changed a lot already in the last like 20 years. And like our social relations are changing. And so like I think he needs to put more emphasis on social relations. And if Yanis Varoufakis doesn't put enough emphasis on social relations, like I think that is important. If you look at this from a historical materialist lens, okay, like the point of historical materialism is to try and understand where society is at in order to reproduce itself at any given stage in a given epoch. And so like the social relations are what does that, like who produces the value, and then like what type of social relations fit together to try and reproduce that value that everyone lives off as a society. Now, if like society is so industrialized today that like a lot of that value is kind of catered for by like automated processes, machines, and et cetera, and like our social relations are changing to kind of reflect that, and it's predicated less and less on like the relationship between capital and labor, and now it's just about controlling the consumer class, and the consumer class is all encompassing. Like a cloud serf could be anyone, even members of the bourgeoisie. It could be like anyone that has access to a phone. Like you can go anywhere in the third world and they might not have running water and stuff like that, but they'll have phones. I'll give you that much. I'll tell you that much for free. They have in smartphones. And so like, everyone is helping to reproduce or to produce value that is consumed by techno-feudalists. That is a massive change in our social relations. And if Yanis doesn't talk about this too much, then like that's Yanis's problem. But like this guy doesn't talk about the social relation at all. He talked about cloud serfs once, and like since then he's just been talking about like how the cloudalists or the techno-feudalists practice same business tactics as the capitalists, which is a fair point. He's not wrong. But I haven't really heard him talk about the social relations at all, which is stunning, because like the claim is what killed capitalism. And capitalism is a mode of production predicated on very particular social relations. And so like, where's the analysis of the social relations themselves?
So I've essentially been arguing that Varoufakis is trying to treat an evocative analogy as if it's a new political economic
and it is
theory.
evocative, which is something that I think Drunk Ancestor said. Like it's just like Yanis is just like, picking a term out that's going to sell the book kind of thing and become a bestseller. And that's pretty much it is evocative, calling it techno-feudalism. But like he explains that right at the start of the book, why he wants to call it techno-feudalism and not like cloud capitalism or something like that. He thinks it deserves a change because it's effectively a qualitative shift. And it would be a qualitative shift if you think of it in terms of its effect on social relations and where value is coming from now. And if value is not being produced by labor, and value is being shifted towards data collection, and that is a massive change in society, and something that I'm not sure if we're all ready for. Stephen said, "Oh my God, it's the first time I've seen him out of the mask." welcome, Stephen. Yeah, it's true. This is what it looks like, mate. Get used to seeing this mug, because it's going to be on streams more often. I don't think Ollie read the book. I don't know. I think Ollie read this very superficially. Like, he's obviously read it. Like, because you can sit down when you read a book and be like, all right, I need to get something in particular out of this book, like an understanding of this or an understanding of that, or like you read like you hate read a book and you're just like, yeah, this guy's wrong, and like you look at every point that they make and try and analyze why it's wrong. So like there's a bit of too much critical, like where can I find holes in his theory so I can make a piece of content kind of stuff going on here. Jordan talked about how Combank profited from child slavery and deforestation, which led to orangutans dying. And ANZ profited from, I guess, the only thing I could describe it as is the US's vassal state in the Levant. Ha, right. Yeah, you'd be sensitive if you said the real word. Banks suck, but major banks are sickening. Especially when they're basically like protected by the state as well. They can never do anything wrong. Yeah, every time you tap and go, you feed the monster. Use cash, protect your data, protect your data. That's the oil of the 21st century. Protect your data. Cash is not the answer. Cash requires massive centralized stores and brings back street crime. But we already have the power to replace these systems. The genie is out of the bottle. Street crime is a result of poverty, not cash. That's interesting. What's doing Adelays? It's Jerry Poppins in the house. No way. Welcome. It must be lunchtime. Jerry Poppins coming in to say hi. Isn't rail. Ha, that's pretty good. That's really good, actually. I'm going to use that from now on. It's not Israel. It isn't rail. I personally think Ollie has hand-waved Yanis' argument. Yeah, pretty much. It does seem like that. But let's let him finish before I take it any further, I guess. Solid pun. It is a solid pun. It's almost as good as there's like a really old-school South Park joke, and like all the kids are addicted to Ritalin, and like a chef goes to the chemist and was like, we need a cure for Ritalin. What's what can we give the children? And they're like, the only cure for Ritalin is Riddle out. And I'm like, hey, I get it. That's a good one. So it's not Israel, it's isn't rail. I'm going to use that from now, and that'll piss off a few people off for sure.
And the gap between these two becomes even more apparent towards the end of the book, where his preferred techno-feudal analysis doesn't lead to any novel insights about what to actually do about the situation we're in. Indeed, worse than that, he expresses severe doubt that we'll find a route out of this situation through our existing democratic processes. On this new political stage, social democracy is impossible. We no longer have capital on the one side and labour on the other, allowing a social democratic government to play referee and force the two sides into a compromise. And even if they wanted to, Varoufakis doubts that governments would be able to tackle the monopolistic behaviours and economic power of the cloudalists, dismissing the possibility of effective regulation or of breaking up these cloud fiefdoms. But how does one break up Amazon, Facebook, PayPal, or indeed Tesla today? And, unlike national phone companies, which are national governments forced to charge the same rates when calling customers of competing companies, how can they force Twitter to share the backlog of all your tweets, photos and videos with, say, Mastodon? I find these stances surprising and unhelpful. Surprising because we saw during the COVID pandemic just how powerful the nation state can be when it has the political will to act. And it's unhelpful because I think all progressives should be promoting democracy as a key part.
Yeah, like, come on. Like, yes, the state has incredible power, but like, at whose disposal? That's the real question. That's the real question. It has incredible power, and who benefited off the state's power during things like the pandemic? When everyone went into lockdown, it was like, big tech companies that were able to connect the world through their digital infrastructure that like profited massively during the pandemic. If anything, that has kickstarted techno feudalism, or really delved us into a system like techno feudalism, because the digital infrastructure had to work, and so they were able to iron out a lot of the kinks and get people connected in a way digitally that they may not have wanted to do before. And like, who else benefited from like, mandates about like your medical history and things like that? It was pharmaceutical companies. So like, the state rolled out and exercised its massive and enormous power, but it did so in the name of big capital interests, the tech bourgeoisie and the pharmaceutical industry. So like, yes, the state has power, and in a neoliberal era, it has power to do what it is told by capital, not as an entity working of its own volition and just making up policy decisions on the fly. It's making up policy decisions thanks to lobby groups and think tanks that are funded by the richest people in the world. So like, come on, bro. Cloud equals server. I know it's not as exciting. It isn't as exciting. It's not. I'm sorry. Specifically, someone else's server. It's someone else's server until you crack the password. Ooh, we got hackers in here. Calm down. They're going to shut us down again, everyone. The tech bros benefited massively from COVID. Massively. Massively. Cloud never made sense to me from the jump. Why would you going to sell your hardware to rent space on someone else's? When cloud shit started. Whoa, did that just get taken away while I was reading it? Or have I missed something? Message redacted. It did get redacted. Wow, what did you say? You badass. Yeah, we're starting to get censored properly here. Oh well. Someone else's hardware, then cloud shit started, was a truly maddening time. No, I fixed the typo. Sorry. Okay. I thought we were getting censored again. I'm getting nervous.
Part of the process for any such change. So why say that social democracy is impossible? In fact, he slightly contradicts his own suggestion that governments can't enact change, when at one point he says, "Indeed, the great irony from a Western perspective is that the only political force that can do anything to keep the cloudalists in check, and thus the hope of democracy alive, is the Chinese Communist Party. But
I knew it.
China is hardly taking actions to protect the freedom
Is it commie? Get him! Fucking Yanis Varoufakis.
and autonomy of its citizens." So Varoufakis ends up sounding like he thinks it's only the Western democratic governments that can't or won't act to break up the monopolistic powers of these companies. And yet, for example, the EU have recently passed a law that is forcing Apple to allow other.
The EU doesn't have any cloud capitalists. They don't. The EU missed the window. All right, they're the only reason the EU is passing legislation to kind of regulate these guys in the first place is because they don't have anyone in the tech bourgeoisie that's in Europe to really vouch for their interests. Like, all of the tech people are in Silicon Valley. So like, if there was a whole bunch of EU-based like techno feudalists, then like it would be a very different ball game. And that's why JD Vance was over there, slapping the Europeans on the hand, saying they've been very naughty by regulating the American tech sector and killing free speech. Like, that's the explanation there. That's why the EU seems so progressive. It's only because like the tech bourgeoisie obviously doesn't have enough power in the EU.
App stores on the iPhone. Also, the EU and the Federal Trade Commission in America are both separately investigating Amazon for anti-competitive behavior, rightly accusing Amazon of abusing its position as both running the market and selling goods on the market. If found guilty, they both have the power to force Amazon to change this behavior or face huge fines. Then there are the ongoing attempts by Australia and Canada to change the dynamics between Facebook and news media organizations. And yeah,
isn't that funny? Because like, isn't the change like to allow the news like organizations in Australia to get access to their algorithms so they can just be ahead of the curve and continue to survive in a social media landscape? It's got nothing to do with like trying to take their control from them and like, you know, have a balanced media or something like that. It's just literally like old media was about to die. And so it reached out to its powers in government and were just like, come on, man, get us access to the algorithm because we're going to die otherwise.
There's the TikTok ban in America. Now, of course, the companies are pushing back on all of these moves, and the regulatory interventions may not all be sensible and may not work as intended, but they are examples that show that democratic Western governments can force companies to change the way that they behave within a market, and thereby reduce their feudal-like powers. And there are many other voices, like Chokepoint Capitalism, with many different suggestions for how governments could and should regulate these companies' behaviors more, and how societies should resist their attempts to lock us onto their platforms. But if you simply nodded along to Varoufakis' book, you would get the impression that such interventions are almost impossible to imagine in the West without a full-blown revolutionary overthrow of, well, capitalism. There are significant ways in which our political economy is changing, but Techno Feudalism doesn't capture them well. So while I was impressed by a different book by Varoufakis, And the Weak Suffer What They Must, which is well worth a read, I can't really recommend Techno Feudalism. But have you read the book? What did you think of it? Am I being too harsh in my critique? Or indeed, what have I missed? Please do continue the discussion in the comments below and subscribe to my channel for similar videos. Thank you for watching.
Thank you. What a legend. Here comes the footy ads. All right. So what are we up to here? Hit those comments. Yeah, I know. I was going to do that. I think it's not a bad idea. All right. Let's see the first one. I do think there are flaws in Varoufakis' hypotheses. But I think one problem with your criticism is that you're not fully engaging with the Marxist framework of the argument. Although you seem to be going that way at the start of the video, the Marxist understanding of historical epochs is that you can best frame them in terms of economic class relations, that is, with reference to different types of relations to the means of production which dominate at a particular time. So in slave-based societies, you have masters and slaves, which is not only a power relation, but an economic relationship. Similarly, with feudalism and capitalism, both with their unique classes, forms of production and consumption, and relations of means of production, there were something like capitalist relations present in feudal times, and there have been forms of slavery in the age of capitalism, but the epoch is defined by the primary set of economic relations. What I think Varoufakis is correctly gesturing towards, although somewhat hyperbolically, is that we are experiencing a fundamental shift in our relationship to the means of production. That's what I was kind of talking about, I guess, the social relations there. We are basically producing big data for free on platforms and services that is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to avoid using in the modern world. This is roughly, although not perfectly, analogous to rent extraction. If we want to ensure our digital survival, so to speak, which is strongly linked to our ability to act in the real world, we are obliged to accede to the extraction of these cloud rents. Big data is now such a driving force in the economy that this isn't just a minor point of interest. When these rents are extracted, they are used to manipulate our behavior, sold and stored and used in all sorts of ways we don't individually understand or have control over. This person, very well written response here. When these rents are extracted, they are used to manipulate our behavior. Yeah, I read that. We're alienated from our data in a way which isn't dissimilar to how we are alienated from our labor under traditional capitalism. I think it is fair to say that this isn't that this really doesn't represent a new kind of economic relationship, one that may have antecedents and historical analogies, but which is still fundamentally different. If the new economic relationship were to become not just part of our world, but the characteristic economic relationship around society is organized, then from a Marxist perspective, we would have entered into a new economic epoch. I don't that has actually happened. I don't think that has actually happened. But still, Varoufakis is onto something. He has noticed a new set of classes and class relations emerging. This is which can't really be understood simply as capitalists and consumers and workers, because the dynamic is fundamentally different. I think that's a pretty good response. And guess what? I bet you, look, his symbol is here. Let's see how old Ollie Sharp has responded. Fuck, it's another essay. Of course it is. Hi, there is great articulation. This is a great articulation of the best interpretation of Varoufakis' claim. Indeed, I think you've expressed it more clearly than Varoufakis did in his book. And you're right that I should have done more in my video to address these aspects of the claim. But I did hint a little at the route that I would take in the moment when I showed that everyone, including the richest cloudless at times in the role of being the cloud serf. And indeed, it's also true that almost all people employed at any level in a company are now also entangled in the software tools of the company that would also make them a cloud prole. So to me, the problem with trying to redefine class tensions down this route is that it doesn't identify genuinely different groups of people, but different roles that we play at different points of our lives. So I agree that our enforced participation in the creation of big data is a new phenomenon, but I'm not sure if that helps define a class of people as much as help define a new type of asset, the big data that is then bought and sold and exploited through markets. We also have a new kind of technology, high fidelity influencing, that are more advanced personalized versions of previous marketing. I'm sorry, I can't read all of this. So you are right that it would have been better if I had addressed these kinds of issues, and agree that we are seeing some interesting new dynamics in our political economy from these new kinds of assets and technologies. But I don't think Varoufakis' kind of analysis really helps us identify new classes of people, a new kind of tension that is different from those already expressed in tensions identified within capitalism between super wealthy owners of capital and the working class exploited by the labor market. But I really like the succinct way that you've expressed what Varoufakis was arguing for, and I'm curious if you think there's anything glaringly missing from my further comments here. Thank you. Wow, that person didn't come back for another bite at the cherry? No, they didn't. They're just going to let him slide? Yep, they let him slide. That was a good response. And like my argument I was rather concerned about the idea of the new social relations that are forming under a system that is kind of given new motives because of the means of production that are available to us now. We've got means of production now in this system that we have never, ever had access to before. Like never, ever have we been able to, like I said, monitor entire populations with as much accuracy as like we can today. Like that has just never been possible in human society. And so like this is a way of controlling people. And I think it moves beyond even the traditional analysis of modes of production, which is all about producing value and like controlling a laboring class to produce value and stuff like that. Like let me just take it back to like there's this really interesting kind of notion in Karl Marx's The Grundrisse, where he talks about the kind of the inflexive relationship, so the dialectical relationship between production and consumption. So production presupposes consumption. So like you won't produce something as a capitalist unless you know someone's out there to consume it, because you're just wasting your time. But then consumption also presupposes production, because if you're going to consume something, then obviously that means like someone's made something. Like whether you made yourself a sandwich or you bought a sandwich from Subway, like someone produced it. So like realistically, if you think about production and consumption, they're ideally they are the same thing. Really, they presuppose one another, and they're just like an expression for one unified process. So this is a dialectical kind of understanding here. And so like, if you understand that like the whole of human history has been kind of can be defined by class struggle, something that people really hate, like that analysis. But like, it's about like who controls the means of production and then who controls the working class that operates the means of production so everyone can live off the value that is being produced. If you now, all you have to do, because the technology is so advanced, is just control the consumer class, as opposed to actually having to put in motion a working class to produce you value and stuff like that. The value production is being kind of taken care of over there by like a group of capitalists that like employ some laborers and some machines and stuff like that. But like the real dynamics of society now is being shifted over to focus on the consumption class, because the consumption class are the ones that produce all of the data, and that's where the value is at now in a society. Like, we've talked about this idea before. Industrial society is at a point where we're at post scarcity. I know it still costs to produce stuff, but like food is pretty much like in advanced countries, it's a non-issue. It's just a distribution game. Housing, it's a non-issue. It's just a distribution game. Governments take care of certain services, like, you know, providing them telecommunications infrastructure, providing services, keeping society kind of afloat and going through social security and welfare and all that sort of stuff, providing services generally. If you don't have to worry about all of those elements, you can have a group of people that sit above society and change the focus of society's social relations just about extracting data from a consumer class in order to control them and get them to only consume what you dictate needs to be produced, as opposed to like capitalists who prospectively produce stuff because they think that someone's going to consume it. They hope that someone will buy it and they'll be able to realize their profit. If now you have a bunch of techno feudalists that really can, like, to a T, control the consumer class to such a degree where they manufacture exactly what their desires are and control and modify their behavior, then like the production kind of thing is a result of consumption in that sense. Like, someone just needs to control the production side of things, but that production is predominantly controlled by the consumer and the data that you collect off consumers. So you know exactly what they want even before they do. And so you can start to make production subservient to like a large consumer class that you're just extracting data from. And so like production kind of takes like a back seat in all of that. And like, this is not new. Like, as capitalism has developed and become more intricate, as industrial society has become more and more and more advanced, like production has taken more of a backseat role. Like the old industrial capitalist versus the worker thing, that like the romantic period of worker versus capitalist kind of thing that was happening 150 years ago, it's gone now. Like, you know, capitalists for the large part have revolutionized the means of production and the productive forces to cancel out a lot of labor anyway. So labor has a diminished power in that process. And so like, if you're diminishing the power of labor in that process all around, like the result of it is that the consumer class is going to become more important anyway, because they're the only ones that really influence production in that stage, if production is really being kind of taken out of the hands of workers anyway. And so like, this is a step on the way to producing a new society. I don't think me personally, I don't think we're at techno feudalism yet. But if this book is anything, it's a blueprint for what a techno feudal society may develop into, and like what we are staring down the barrel at right now. We are staring down the barrel of something very, very scary that we have never really dealt with before as a social unit. The closest that we've ever come to this is, you could argue, is like kind of totalitarian structures like, you know, Nazi Germany or like Stalinist Russia or something like that. Those type of totalitarian kind of environments, or like if anyone's been involved in like a hardcore corporate structure, like those type of environments are completely totalitarian, as in like there's top-down control. They tell you what to say, they tell you what your mission statement is, everyone toes the party line, and they tell you how to think, therefore, and they tell you how to work, like what to produce and what to consume and what to do, and then they tell you basically even how to dress. Like, you have to look a certain way, and like you can be expelled from that system for like thinking the wrong thing, or being even accused of thinking of the wrong thing. And like this type of techno feudal structure, if they're really mapping you, like really mapping you based on like data collection and stuff like that, um, like the control is almost incomprehensible for us as humans. Like we can't really sit right here, right now, and try and think about all the ways that this could turn really scarily totalitarian really, really, really quickly if data becomes more and more important and people become like people become coerced more and more to living an online existence. And like it happens everywhere that you go. When you go out somewhere, now, sometimes you can't make payments unless they're online. You're forced to make payments and do things online. You're forced to register for things online. You can't fill out paperwork anymore in the physical realm. You've got to download an app to do it and stuff like that. Like these are real material conditions that are happening that you can all see in your lives right now, that like life is becoming digitized. Even if you're outside in the physical realm, it is very hard to survive now as a human being without a smartphone. Is becoming increasingly difficult, especially if you want to be a functioning member of society. If you just want to go outside and walk around in the park, go for it. But like if you actually want to go out and do stuff and interact with other people, social relations, you need to have access to a smartphone. And like I said before, like this is not just an advanced world thing. Like if you go to third world countries and stuff like that, like I said, people might not have might not even have running water or electricity properly, but like they will have access to smartphones somehow. They will have like chips, or like they will have access to the internet somehow, and like they will be plugged in and producing data. This value production is like something that we've never seen before. Now you could say there's no material basis for this data. It's overvalued. It's not real. It's abstract. But like in the same way that the value produced by workers is technically abstract, like no one goes around and counts surplus value, but we know that surplus value exists to a certain extent because, why would an employer or a boss like pay a worker for if they're not producing value for them to make profit off? Like there must be additional value that is made within the system for someone to make profit off. And so, but like it's an abstract notion, but like value today in the sense of like, data value that's being produced, it is value for someone. It is producing value for someone. And like that might not be monetary. That might not be monetary. Okay, just because like there's billions of dollars made like every second on the market thanks to people that are extracting data and data mining and data trading and all that sort of stuff. The value that's being produced may just be in terms of total control, as I was saying before. That may be the difference here, is just about a society based on absolute control, which is scary. That's scary in and of itself. Moving away from modes of production to modes of total control. That's an incredibly scary thought. All right, so let's move on to a new comment then. I listened to the first 8 minutes. Good summary of Techno Feudalism. I'm fully convinced to buy the book. The rest is redundant. There's a lot of Yanis supporters in here. Oh my God. I would say ultimately, looking at the big picture, Techno-Feudalism is an apt term to describe where we're going as increasingly as time goes on. The wealth distribution reflects a feudal society where a tiny, wealthy upper class owns almost all the wealth and assets, a small middle class and a massive underclass that owns nothing, rents everything they have, and has very little opportunity to improve their lot in life. We're not quite there yet, but we're well on our way. So that seems to be the general like pro-Yanis kind of sentiment that's going on here. All right, we might not be there yet, but leave Yanis alone. He's on to something. This guy has very limited understanding of how these technology companies use data. Out of touch, thumbs down. Ooh, snap. This guy's getting hammered in the comment section. Saying Amazon is just like the supermarket is saying Walmart is just like a mum and pop shop. Yet Walmart did entirely change the economic dynamics of the world. You are underestimating the effect of digital golems, which is a doppelganger of ourself in the digital world constructed specifically with the intent to influence our behaviors. Yes, it is huge and completely changed everything on how we do business and how we do politics in much more dramatic way than neoliberalism mega corporations did. Shit. He's responded to this one too. Let's see what his response is. Of course, there's a big difference between Amazon and supermarkets, but Varoufakis was seeming to imply things like Amazon picking what it puts in front of the consumer is a new phenomenon rather than being a digital enhancement of existing phenomenon. Did he write another essay? Fucking hell. And basically I'm saying, let's not be dazzled by the tech into feeling that society has no agency here. Most of these problematic business practices that we've seen before and could be challenged if we wanted to. And yes, there is too much lobbying of governments to protect such businesses, but that too is nothing to do with the cloud. I think, you know what, it's funny because like, I think he's making out, like this insinuates to me, I was like, oh, we have the ability to stop this from happening and changing it. Like we have the ability to stop capitalism too, but like, are people going to mobilize and do that? Like, and like the answer is a resounding no, as history would say, because most people don't give a shit about politics and stuff like that. And like, there's been a few attempts to do so, but like, you know, nothing has hit the mark yet and changed the mode of production based on capital. And so like, yeah, there's always the potential to change it, but like, you know, this machine is pretty large and like, you know, it starts to turn and like the more ingrained it gets, the harder it is to change. So like, you know, fair enough, but whatever. If it's free, you're the product. Yes, David. Unfortunately, I would say with Techno Feudalism, even if you do nothing, you are still the product. Yeah, it's a scary thought. And so like, this is the dialectical relationship I was talking about, like product to consumption. Like consumption and product are linked. So like, if you are the product and the consumer, like you give the value and you create, you know, you create the value and you're giving value to the system at the same time because you're the consumer kind of thing. Like you're the ultimate end goal. So if they just capture you entirely and tell you what to consume and like force feed you stuff, like, you know, cut out the capital altogether, the capitalist altogether, cut out the laborer altogether. We can automate all of that shit. Let's just control consumption to a T. See ya. Thanks for the stream. It was great breaking down Techno Feudalism. Thank you, Wings of Cheese. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. Wall-E. Yeah, it's a bit Wall-E like, all of this stuff. Yeah. The way that like the consumer is completely controlled. And they live in a complete state of like comfort. They have everything provided for them, but like, you know, are they really free? Graeber is Graeber, not Graeber. Still makes me sad that Graeber died. Way too young and so sudden. One moment he was here and the next gone. A serious loss to the anarchist space. Yes, it is sad about Graeber. I liked his thinking. Oh, my bad. Yeah, I've liked his books. Bro, I can't write a YouTube comment half this size without it being deleted. That's interesting. Hey, we are being censored. Maybe just because like it's too insightful, some of the commentary in here. It's a bit of a cop-out. Well, if people want to change it, they'll change it. That kind of misses the point of manufacturing consent. Yeah, it does kind of like, it's just like, oh, well, it can be changed. So it's not a change because it can be changed. It's like, yeah, capitalism can be changed. So is it really a system that we should be worried about? And he talked about being a progressive and all that sort of stuff and revolutionizing systems. No need for the background music. You have a great voice and you're presenting interesting ideas and commentary, and that's enough to hook us. I respectfully disagree. But I don't know if it's a good book, but I do know that your critique was not very convincing. For example, Amazon is not a solitary entity. It bought Whole Foods, sells Kindle. It's part of a vast conglomerate that controls shopping, entertainment, news, and so forth. It's going to decide who plays the next 007. Excellent review. I am so happy I stumbled upon your channel. Yes, I read the book and can see how Techno Feudalism was qualitatively different from capitalism and what it could be about. And couldn't see, sorry. Interesting. I like how he responds to everything. Look at this guy go. Yeah, Ollie. I'm a big fan of trying to respond to everything. Everything that you can, anyway. Oh my god! David, that you? The algorithm is smiling at this time. He doesn't even realize how he's being manipulated. God, I hope that's you, David. That's so good. I'm going to like the comment. This is like Inception. We're seeing commentary of someone that's sitting in the chat right now. It's crazy. In the US, we all live in a Wall Street feudalist society. Now with the combination of finance and tech, it's going to become even more feudalistic. Yeah, I remember, what's her name? Mary Lease, I think, talked about like the power of Wall Street and like how they control kind of everything. They control society in almost feudalistic proportions. Yeah. Well, look, I'm going to leave it there. I thought this was an interesting critique. I'll have to decide whether we're going to put some more time into Techno Feudalism. I actually want to go through some like, mainstream kind of commentary on this. So like look at some like, I don't know, like media organizations that have taken up and tried to explain Techno Feudalism and see what like the general consensus is out there on Techno Feudalism. So maybe we'll do that next. Tomorrow we are on Twitch though, so we're not on YouTube. We can go over there and we get censored much less. Let me just say, like people are actually allowed to chat stuff as long as it's not like violent or swearing and stuff like that. I think people are allowed to say stuff, but like I have the ability to let things through, so we can talk better over there. And we can watch stuff there without being censored too, surprisingly not. So like, yeah, if you want to join tomorrow, we'll have another live stream, same time, just on Twitch. So like there's a link if you want to go and become a follower over there so you don't miss out. And yeah, and then we'll do Thursday on Twitch and then Friday back here on YouTube for the last live stream of the week. So yes, thank you everyone. I think this has been interesting to see like people critiquing it, and like I understand this guy's point. Okay, I understand what this guy is talking about in relation to like a lot of the, what is his name? Go Meta with Ollie Sharp. I understand what Ollie Sharp is saying in terms of like, hey, all of the stuff he's complaining about, like in terms of how they work as like organizations, as businesses, is exactly how capitalists work as businesses. And like they've been doing it all the whole time anyway. It is you. I knew it. Well, anyway, I've liked your comment. I hope it bumps it up a little bit. But like, yeah, it's yes, they work like businesses, they work like corporations and stuff like that. But like I think what Yanis is offering is a little bit more of like a social critique and then like a historical materialist critique of things, like how this fits into a larger picture of like economics through the ages, as opposed to just like techno-feudalism versus capitalism kind of thing. And like I think that nuance is being lost a little bit here. But like he raises some good points. All this stuff is happening already anyway, so like whatever. But yes, that's it for today. Thank you all for joining me. So let me just do a quick roll call. David, Cindy the Skull, good to have you. 4AS, of course, as always. Jag, Wings of Cheese, the Drunk Ancestor. I hope you have joined up properly so you don't miss out on future stuff. Wings of Cheese, Ollie Atlas, of course. Jerry Poppins came in for a second there and then darted off. Stephen Z, we had Stephen in here, checking out my face for the first time apparently. I think I have not missed anyone, have I? No. The chat was spicy today. It's a good point. Oh, Katia, of course. You're at the start too. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time, different place on Twitch. And until next time, please remember, oh, almost. I think that by unmasking, you've provided YouTube something of value, your identity. I think they'll be pushing out your channel. Well, you know, maybe. I was always wondering if that had something to do with it as well. Like the algorithm doesn't like it because it can't like classify me very well. Now the algorithm has full access to my biometric data, and like it can slot me in somewhere nicely. We will see if that theory holds any weight, good sir. All right. Please remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery. See you all tomorrow. Thanks again.